why most people fail before they even start. Try answering honestly without trying to sound wise. How many things in your life failed not because you tried and didn't succeed, but because you never truly tried at all? Not a business that went bankrupt, not a relationship that ended, not a book that was written and then rejected by publishers, but a business whose idea remained only in your phone's notes, a relationship where feelings were never expressed, a book where only the first chapter was written, before being left untouched for 3 years. There is a psychological fact rarely discussed, yet it explains almost all the failures of modern humans. We are not afraid of failure. We are afraid to start because starting opens up the possibility that we will know with certainty the true limits of our abilities. As long as something remains unstarted, it stays perfect in our minds. Once it begins, it becomes real, finite, and subject to judgment. This is the reason why millions of people die carrying dreams they never tried to realize, not because they failed to pursue them, but because they never even started. And this video isn't about how to become more motivated. It's about something far deeper. Why the human brain is secretly wired to protect us from starting, and how Stoic philosophers 2,000 years ago already understood how to overcome it. Problem. Almost everyone has a version of this story. Someone has a great idea, the necessary skills, and even the time to spare. Yet, that idea never leaves their head. A business plan sits neatly tucked away in a Google Drive folder that was last opened 8 months ago. The intention to start exercising is always set for next Monday, but that Monday never actually arrives. Feelings for someone are kept tightly under wraps until that person marries someone else. Interestingly, these people aren't lazy. Many of them are actually highly productive, just not with their own work. They are diligent about answering emails, managing the household, and helping others complete their projects. Yet, when it comes to their own projects, things that are deeply personal and involve risk, they suddenly become experts at procrastination. We call it procrastination, and we usually punish ourselves for it, viewing it as a sign of laziness or a lack of discipline. But that is a mistaken diagnosis. Most people who procrastinate are not lazy. They are deeply afraid. Not afraid of simple failure, but afraid of something far more complex. The fear of discovering the truth about themselves. Before a project begins, it exists as pure potential. In one's mind, that novel could be the greatest ever written. That business venture could be life-changing. That declaration of love could mark the start of a beautiful story. But once it begins, that potential must confront reality, and reality is almost always messier, slower, and more prone to failure than the visions in one's head. So, many people unconsciously choose to live forever in a waiting room, a place where everything is still possible, because nothing has yet been attempted. Human psychology. To understand why this happens, we need to look at a psychological concept known as the fear of self-assessment. Research on procrastination over the past few decades has revealed something surprising. Chronic procrastination is more closely linked to poor emotional regulation than to poor time management. People do not procrastinate because they lack the ability to create a schedule. They procrastinate because the task triggers uncomfortable emotions, such as anxiety, a sense of inadequacy, or the fear of being judged, and the brain, in its highly efficient way, chooses to avoid those emotions by avoiding the task itself. This is where the greatest irony lies. Procrastination feels like an escape from pain, yet it actually creates far greater pain down the line. Guilt, regret, and, most dangerously, a mounting self-doubt regarding one's own abilities. But in the short term, in those fleeting seconds when someone chooses to open social media instead of that daunting blank document, the brain experiences instant relief. And the brain, by nature, always favors instant relief over long-term benefits, because that is simply how the human brain's reward system has always worked. There is also the imposter phenomenon, the feeling that one's achievements are undeserved and that sooner or later the world will realize one is not actually as capable as one appears. For those with this tendency, starting something new feels perilous, as the beginning is the moment one is most vulnerable to appearing unskilled. A project that hasn't yet begun cannot be judged poorly, but an awkward first chapter, an ugly initial prototype, or a nervous first video, these can all be evaluated. And for someone whose identity hinges on appearing competent, that feels like an existential threat. Furthermore, there is a psychological bias known as present bias, the brain's tendency to place far greater weight on immediate discomfort than on future benefits, even when those future benefits are objectively much larger. The discomfort of getting started feels real and urgent right now. In contrast, the regret of never having started, while far more significant, feels abstract and distant, lurking at some point in the future that cannot yet be clearly envisioned. Consequently, the brain, naturally wired to respond to immediate threats, chooses to avoid today's discomfort and leaves that immense regret for our future selves to deal with. Human nature. To understand why this pattern is so universal, we need to look more deeply into the fundamental nature of humans as a species. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans lived in small groups where reputation was everything. Being ostracized from the group in a world where surviving alone was nearly impossible often meant death. Consequently, the human brain evolved to be highly sensitive to social threats, including the threat of judgment, rejection, or appearing to fail in front of others. In that context, the caution to avoid trying and failing publicly is actually a smart instinct, not a weakness. Our overly impulsive ancestors, those who attempted risky endeavors without calculation and frequently failed in front of the group, risked losing status, mates, and even their place within the very group that protected them from predators and starvation. Thus, the instinct to hold back, to wait until one is sure, and to avoid starting something until the likelihood of success is high, became hardwired into our nervous systems as a survival mechanism. The problem is the modern world operates by very different rules. Today, successful people aren't the ones who avoid public failure the most. Rather, they are the ones who start most often, appear awkward at the outset, and frequently put their reputations on the line by attempting something that isn't yet perfect. Yet, our primal instincts haven't gotten the memo. The oldest parts of our brains still treat appearing to fail in front of others as a threat to survival, even though in the modern world, a failed video or an unsuccessful business idea rarely poses a genuine threat to anyone's life. There is another fundamental aspect of human nature at play here. Humans are storytelling creatures. We do not merely act. We construct narratives about who we are based on our actions or our lack thereof. Interestingly, not starting something allows a person to maintain a more comfortable narrative about themselves. I actually could do it. I just haven't gotten around to it yet. That thought is far less burdensome to carry than the alternative. I tried, and it turned out I wasn't good enough. Consequently, many people subconsciously choose never to put that first narrative to the test, preferring to live with untested potential rather than face known limitations. Storytelling. There is one historical example that illustrates this pattern very clearly and surprises many people when they first hear it: Leonardo da Vinci. Leonardo is remembered as one of the greatest geniuses in human history, a painter, inventor, engineer, and anatomist. Yet few realize that Leonardo actually completed very little of what he started. His notebooks, spanning thousands of pages, are filled with sketches of flying machines, designs for ideal cities, anatomical studies far ahead of their time, and hundreds of other projects. Yet the vast majority of these were never finished. Even the Mona Lisa, now considered the most famous painting in the world, was a work he carried with him for years, constantly refining it, and one that he himself almost never deemed truly complete. Historians studying his life often note that Leonardo possessed such vast curiosity and such exacting standards of perfection that many of his projects stalled, not due to a lack of talent, but because he was constantly torn between starting something new and perfecting something old, never feeling that any single work was truly ready to be deemed complete. He even wrote in his own notes, in a tone bordering on regret, about the vast amount of time he had spent without producing a finished result. Just imagine that for a moment. One of the most brilliant minds in human history, with access to resources, fame, and recognition, remained trapped in the same pattern that ensnares millions of ordinary people today: the struggle to finish what was started, because the standard of perfection in one's mind always seemed greater than anything that could actually be realized within the available time. Yet, there is an important detail about Leonardo that people often overlook. Although he left behind so many unfinished projects, he never stopped starting. He kept opening new notebooks, making new sketches, and trying new things, even when he knew, realistically, that he might never complete them all. There is a vast difference between someone who never begins out of a fear of imperfection and someone who keeps starting despite knowing the result may never be perfect. Leonardo was the latter, and his legacy, thousands of pages of half-formed ideas still being studied 5 centuries later, proves that an imperfect beginning is far more valuable than a perfection that never gets started. Stoic insight. This is where the thinking of Stoic philosophers becomes highly relevant, even though it was written 2,000 years before the word procrastination even became a commonly used psychological term. Epictetus, who became one of the most influential teachers of philosophy in Rome, taught a principle that forms the foundation of all Stoic philosophy: clearly distinguish between what is within our control and what is not. The ultimate outcome of an endeavor, whether it succeeds, whether others like it, or whether it turns out perfectly, lies entirely beyond our control. Only one thing is truly within our control: whether we choose to act according to our best judgment today, regardless of the outcome that follows. Viewed through the lens of Epictetus, the fear of starting is actually a cognitive error. We attempt to control something we can never control, the outcome, while neglecting the only thing truly within our power: the decision to take action. In his personal notes, now known as Meditations, Marcus Aurelius repeatedly wrote a simple reminder to himself. Even as the most powerful emperor of his time, he still had to battle his own reluctance every morning, rise and do the work of a human being. He did not wait until he felt ready. He understood that the universe does not wait for emotional readiness, the sun does not hesitate to rise, and plants do not wait for inspiration to grow. For Marcus Aurelius, starting was not about feeling certain of success. It was part of fulfilling one's fundamental function as a living, acting human being, regardless of the outcome that awaited. In one of his most famous letters, Seneca wrote something that feels as though it were penned specifically for today's generation of procrastinators. He observed that we act as if we have unlimited time, when in fact, time is the one thing that, once lost, can never be reclaimed. Seneca sternly rebuked the habit of delaying action while waiting for the right moment, for he considered the belief that a better time will always lie ahead to be one of the most dangerous illusions a person can harbour. He urged his readers to treat each day as if it were their last opportunity to act, not out of pessimism, but because doing so is the only honest way to truly appreciate the limited time we actually possess. When combined, these three ideas provide a clear answer to the fear of starting. Focus on action rather than results, because action is the only thing that is truly yours. Treat starting as an obligation inherent to your nature as a human being, not as a wager on your self-worth. And remember, the time spent waiting for perfect readiness is time lost forever, while the perfection you are waiting for may never actually arrive. Modern application. Upon closer inspection, this age-old mindset proves remarkably relevant to almost every aspect of modern life. On social media, we are surrounded by highlight reels, the most polished versions of others' lives, presenting the final result without the messy process behind it. This creates an impossible standard where we compare our own awkward Chapter 1 to someone else's heavily edited Chapter 100. Many people unconsciously put off launching an account, creating content, or starting a creative project because they feel they aren't good enough compared to what they see on their feeds, failing to realize that what they are viewing isn't anyone's actual beginning, but rather the outcome of thousands of awkward starts that were never shown. In one's career, this same pattern manifests in different ways. Delaying an application for a dream job because one feels unqualified, putting off starting a business until everything is perfect, or hesitating to pitch an idea in a meeting for fear of sounding foolish. Yet, almost everyone who now appears competent in their field once navigated that same awkward initial phase, a stage that is simply no longer visible, overshadowed by the achievements that followed. In matters of the heart, the fear of taking the first step often manifests as a reluctance to reveal one's feelings, ask someone out, or allow oneself to be truly vulnerable with another person. As long as those feelings remain unexpressed, they stay perfect and full of possibility, safe from rejection. But this also means they never truly materialize into anything real. Many people prefer living with untested possibilities over facing a definitive answer, even when that answer might be exactly what they need to move forward. In friendships, this pattern manifests as a reluctance to reach out to an old friend due to a long lapse in communication, a feeling that the moment has passed, even though a simple message is often enough to rekindle a connection thought to be lost. We procrastinate by imagining scenarios of rejection that rarely come to pass, while the genuine opportunity to reconnect slips away with the passage of time. More broadly, in a modern life filled with distractions and limitless choices, we often fall prey to the illusion that there will always be another time to start, a time that is calmer, more prepared, or more certain. Yet, As the Stoics realized 2 millennia ago, such a moment rarely arrives. There is only today, with all its imperfections, as the singular moment when a new beginning is truly possible. The best time to plant a mango tree was 5 years ago. Had you done so, you would surely be harvesting mangoes and enjoying the fruits of your labor today. The next best time is to plant it today, regardless of your current mood. Conclusion. Ultimately, the most painful failure is not the one that follows hard work, yet yields disappointing results. The most painful failure is the one that never even had the chance to occur, a dream that dies silently within the mind, without witnesses, without a story, and without any lessons to be learned. Leonardo da Vinci left behind thousands of unfinished pages, yet he also left a legacy that is still studied 500 years later precisely because he kept on starting. Epictetus taught that our actions alone are truly our own. Marcus Aurelius would rise each morning, however reluctantly, simply to perform the work of a human being. And Seneca reminded us that time spent waiting for perfect readiness is time that will never return to us. Most people do not fail because they tried and fell short. They fail because they never gave themselves the chance to be tested in the first place. The question worth pondering is not, will I succeed if I start? For no one truly knows the answer until they try. A more honest question is, what would I do today if I stopped waiting to feel ready and started acting like someone who has already made the decision? After all, no finished work was ever born from waiting for perfection. Every creation came into existence because someone chose to begin, imperfections and all, on an ordinary morning that felt anything but special, until the moment they decided to act.